Welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Tibettv. His Holiness the Dalai Lama had to lead his country and people at a young age. His Holiness was only 16 when Tibet went through one of its most critical chapters as Chinese forces invaded Tibet. From leading Tibetans through adversity and reforming governance, to introducing democracy to his people in exile, devolving hereditary rule, His Holiness's legacy is one of resilience, ethical leadership, and an enduring commitment to freedom with non-violence. At age 90, His Holiness continues to inspire not only Tibetans, but millions around the world who seek meaning, justice, and peace. To gain a deeper understanding of the life and legacy of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama, we are honored to be joined by Geshe Lhakdor, a distinguished Tibetan Buddhist scholar and former translator to His Holiness the Dalai Lama for 16 years. At present, Geshe serves as the director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. Welcome to the program, Geshe.
Thank you.
Geshe, so to begin with, His Holiness assumed the spiritual and temporal leadership of Tibet in 1950. His Holiness was only 16 years at the time, and also there was invading forces of Chinese government. A 16-year-old leading a country, when you think about it today, it's probably unimaginable. So besides the need of the hour, what do you think enforced that decision upon a 16-year-old?
When people are desperate, they do everything. So I think it was really a time of great desperation. As you rightly mentioned, on the one hand, the invading Chinese force was looming large all over Tibet. And meanwhile, the Tibetan government also, it looks like for a long time, was not doing proper work. Not only not having prepared for the Chinese invasion, but even otherwise to run the country. I think there was no proper vision, no proper planning. So they were just thinking that, okay, we are independent country, we are okay, that kind of thing. So suddenly when the unwanted Chinese force, start coming, and the people were in complete desperation what to do. Then because, number one, it is a very desperate time. Number two, people, when they lose all kind of hope, then they put their hope in religious, practices, including doing divination or asking a lama to suggest, things like that. So therefore, the one thing that came in their mind was, okay, now it may be His Holiness the Dalai Lama who can do, because he is not just ordinary human being. He's a very special human being, and he's the true reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama, who led the country very well, although he also died relatively young age. So therefore they thought this is the best. So they had several meetings, and everybody in consensus said that we should request His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Then in tune with that, both they consulted the oracles, both the Nechung and Kadung, and they also unanimously said time has come that you lead the country. So therefore, even though he was 16 years old, I cannot say that he very happily accepted that kind of responsibility, but he also did not shy away from the responsibility. He took it with some courage and determination. Yeah.
Right. So Geshe, you mentioned that the then government in Tibet did not seem to be ready to rule the country, and also was not ready for outside interference. What makes you say that?
If you read the history, I cannot narrate the whole story, but if you read the history, for example, when I remember one occasion where somebody with a message saying that the Chinese forces have come and captured certain places, they wanted to inform this to the ministers. Then those people who are to give the message to the ministers, they said, right now we can't go because the ministers are having picnic. So this indicates there's no seriousness. There's no seriousness. That's why we sometimes heard the word kudal, the aristocratic way of ruling things, have no vision, not much contact with other countries. I'm not saying that all of them are useless, but there is a large tendency of negligence of their responsibility.
Right. So Geshe, as we discussed, there was this urgency of foreign interference and invasion in Tibet then. His Holiness at the mere age of 16 showed remarkable qualities of leadership, bringing in initiatives and then amendments and policies. Geshe, could you help us recall some of those policies and amendments in law?
Number one, I recall that as soon as His Holiness was given the responsibility, both the spiritual and temporal responsibility, he freed all the prisoners from two big prisons nearby Lhasa. Right, you remember that? And then also if you read the history, and it is said that His Holiness at a very, very small young age was a very, very compassionate and very concerned about the poor people. So having that kind of quality, innate quality with him, then suddenly when he got the power, the first few things that His Holiness did was he found there were very, very poor farmers, who had hired, money or grain, whatever, from the aristocrats or from the government. Now they are not in a position to give anything. So His Holiness said, no, let us wipe both the capital and the interest. You don't have to pay the capital, don't have to pay the interest. Then there are a second group who are slightly better. They are in a position to pay the capital, but not the interest, but they don't have the capacity to pay the capital right away. So His Holiness said, okay, you do it through installments, and then waive the interest also. And then there are those who are relatively rich, then they have to pay both the capital and the interest. And then also sometimes, we charge interest over interest. And His Holiness said this is wrong. So he stopped all this. Then there are also occasions of, some aristocrats or powerful people, controlling things, be it the administrative, activities, or be it even the supply of water. So His Holiness said, you can't just take control of the water and do not supply it to everybody. So the many things. I mean, if you look at really read all those things, this contents of the Reform Committee, it is amazing. It is really amazing. And then also he said those people who are rich and powerful, they cannot confiscate the land of the poor people. So many things. Today if we look at what is happening in the rest of the world, so-called developed countries are doing all those nasty things. Buying all the land and giving a little bit of money and making the poor poorer and making the rich richer. His Holiness foresaw all this, right? Then also there are cases of students who are very good in religious study but don't have the means to look after the Geshe Tongo, So there also they formed a donation committee or something like that to look after those expenses. And then of course this is mentioned in the 17-point agreement. I think on the number 11 it was mentioned, but the Chinese government at that time said, with the reformation you do whatever you like. But when His Holiness really started doing the reform, they always put an obstacle to it and therefore could not succeed very much. Not only that, but some of the senior the Tibetan government leaders and senior monks from different monasteries, they are also very slow, very sluggish and reluctant. So therefore it did not succeed as was planned, although it brought about a lot of changes. Yeah.
Right. So Geshe, coming into exile now, during His Holiness's meeting with Pandit Nehru on April 24, 1959, in Birla House, Missouri, Nehru said that there can never be a Tibetan government in exile, meaning India. But it was important that the Tibetans have a legitimate representation of the office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to keep our identity alive and also to restore freedom in Tibet. So, Geshe, how did His Holiness and the then cabinet manage to comply with Nehru's wishes while rehabilitating Tibetans in exile?
Yes, that, if you are living as a refugee in someone else's country, then whether you like it or not, you need to go with the advice or suggestion of the leader, Prime Minister, whoever. So of course His Holiness has to be very skillful. So His Holiness mentioned clearly there were occasions when Nehru was really angry with His Holiness. He was even putting his fist on the table, things like that. But His Holiness has to understand all this And then gradually through long discussion, things gradually changed. So, for example, the Central Tibetan administration that we have today, even today we don't call it Tibetan government. You see, because of those sensitivities, because and this is understandable because on the one hand, Nehru and the team of ministers, they were very kind to welcome His Holiness and Tibetan refugees into exile, but at the same time they don't want to annoy the Chinese government, because India had, it was not long before that India had got its independence. Still it is young, not very strong. Although Nehru encouraged His Holiness not to talk about establishing a Tibetan government, things like that. But for me, this is in a way a diplomatic way, because His Holiness had already established Tibetan government when he was on the way escaping to India. At Hunzezung, he had already established Tibetan government. And there he made the declaration by saying, wherever I am and my cabinet ministers are there is Tibetan government. So it's already there basically. But it's a way of, diplomatic way of doing things, yeah.
Right. So Geshe, that is exactly.
And today also, like for example, whether you call it Central Tibetan administration, whatever you call it, Indian government knowing fully well what we are functioning, what we are doing, it's more or less like a government.
Right, Geshe. So the way His Holiness and the cabinet has navigated this complex issue with such sensitivity is another example of exemplary leadership of His Holiness and his visionary leadership as well, right?
Absolutely. This is interesting question, because not only at that time, but later on when His Holiness started visiting different countries, and then because of that particular country's relationship with China, they are a little bit hesitant, reluctant to welcome His Holiness. His Holiness immediately come forward and say, I do not want to create any inconvenience to the host country. He would never say, this is not, this is wrong, what Chinese government doing is wrong, what you are doing is wrong. He do not criticize like that. He said, okay, if you want, I'm happy to come, not for political agenda, but to give the universal message of love and compassion. But because of your relation with China and whatever your problems, if you are hesitant and if you are not feeling comfortable, I'm not in a mood to create any inconvenience to anybody. He has been saying this all along. This is really called diplomacy.
So going back to when you mentioned the 17-point agreement briefly, why was it so important to nullify the 17-point agreement and to declare that the presence of wherever His Holiness is where the Tibetan government would be, right? So in what ways do you see those decisions come to make more sense today?
More sense today because number one, this so-called 17-point agreement was, made under duress. Right. Tibetans were forced. In unequivocal terms, the Chinese side said that if you don't agree, don't seal it, your country will be invaded, and it may cost your life also. So under duress, under force, there was no other choice but to sign it. But then because of the later on, they themselves did not sign it, Chinese government. So therefore, even otherwise, if it is a document which is signed under duress, under force, through terrorism, then in the international law, you have later on, if you get the opportunity, you have every right to not to accept and deny such a negotiation, such a document.
Right. So, as the tragic fate of Tibetans, the new leader, His Holiness, was relatively young in age, right? So do you think that there were concerns among the Tibetan leadership over how seriously the world leaders would take the words of appeal by His Holiness the Dalai Lama? What does your years of experience working?
As I mentioned earlier, number one, we have this strong belief that His Holiness is not an ordinary human being. Number one, that belief is there. And it is not just a belief, but His Holiness had that talent at a very young age, whether it is in terms of his study or in terms of any performance. For example, the changes that he was planning and bringing about, it was clear that he has the vision and he has the capacity. Okay? And then of course, His Holiness is the face. That does not mean he has to do everything.
Right.
The team of ministers also there, you see. So His Holiness is really the leader, the face, but it doesn't mean that he alone has to think and decide everything. So that's not a big issue. But the good thing is that at least there is somebody who is steering the, steering the way. Yes.
Right. So, Geshe, looking within our Tibetan community, we say that one of the greatest gifts that His Holiness has bestowed upon us is the democratic system of governance, right? So, can you please elaborate on how that brought structure to our exile government?
This is very important because of all the forms of government, prevalent today in the world. The democratic form, it may have some vices, but democratic form is accepted to be the best until now. So His Holiness has given this democratic form of ruling the country to the Tibetan people. And then in the case of getting that democratic right, in many countries people have to fight, they have to shed blood, as is happening right now in many countries, But in the case of the Tibetan democracy, the Tibetans, without having to shed a drop of blood, and without having even to request, His Holiness just give it to the people. That's the kind of magnanimity, the great vision and leadership that His Holiness has. So this is very, very important, because basically, at the core of this democratic principle, what he's saying is, people are important, number one. The leaders are not important. Leaders are servant. Reason that he devolved his political power in 2011, right, was also to empower people. That you need to look after yourself. And he said, it is, although you all the Tibetans, you have a lot of trust and faith in me, but it is dangerous to put faith in one person, especially in today's century. Having a religious leader is not a good thing. And His Holiness probably is the only person who is ready to devolve his political leadership and his power without having to ask to do that, you see. He voluntarily gave up that means he doesn't have this craving and grasping for power. He's totally dedicated for people.
So, last but not the least, and to sum all of our discussion up, what makes the present 14th Dalai Lama stand out from his predecessors?
In many cases. Now books have been written, I don't have to recount all of them. Like His Holiness, for example, is among the Dalai Lamas, only Dalai Lama who had visited I don't know how many countries, and how many times. You see, each country visiting how many times. Is the only Dalai Lama who came up with this idea of Buddhist religion, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist science. He's the only person who had this, vision to have dialogue with the leading scientists in the world today. And even in terms of religious responsibilities, he probably is the number one in giving the ordination. Thousands of ordination, novice monk ordination and full ordination from all over the world. And then this notion about teaching secular ethics, the sea learning.
Right.
It was a totally new idea. And then of course revival or preservation of ancient Indian tradition. There are so many which will make His Holiness stand out. Out of all the Dalai Lamas, it was only like the 6th Dalai Lama and the 13th Dalai Lama probably who ventured out a little bit out. And then after that, there's nobody who had traveled so much like His Holiness Dalai Lama, right? And then of course, if you look at the awards and prizes that he has received, several hundreds, no, none of the Dalai Lamas have received such a thing. So there are so many.
So, on this positive note, thank you so much, Geshe, for speaking to Tibettv.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you for watching this episode of In Conversation with Tibettv. I will see you next time.